So good morning, everybody. Today's session about AI newsroom. So as we are all aware of AI, which is no more a fantasy. It's a reality, rather it's a lived reality. We have entered into an area where we coexist with AI daily. So we'll be discussing about AI-enabled newsrooms throughout the day, and we'll understand how it impacts newsrooms. So we have with us Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, President, Editors Guild of India, is also editor Hardnews. So let's kick start on this session and set the tone for the day and understand different perspectives on how AI-enabled newsrooms are impacting both positively or negatively. Sanjay ji.
Thanks so much, Bilal, and thank you, friends, for coming here. It's rather early for any meeting in Delhi. My speech, I thought, I'll share with you how we actually started looking at AI and what should be done about it. I remember that in the early days when we were talking about AI, that is, it's sometime in Jan, the only issue used to be the AI summit which is taking place, and it was a major cause for anxiety for us that journalism or media was not being factored in. It was AI, including some robotic dog which was brought in, much to the embarrassment of the government of the day, which was there. But journalism per se was not factored there. So I thought we must do an AI summit on that. And at that time, when we were talking about it, there was no suggestion that there would be an AI war which will be taking place in the coming days. So for February 28th, you had the first AI war, which was actually driven by coming together of the US government, which brought in Anthropic and Chat GPT and Palantir and many other entities to give a real edge to the what is it called, the fighting machine. So in a certain way, it kind of brought to the focus how AI can impact newsroom. There are reports that the CNN and BBC started investing more in fact checking and gave more space to fact checking and to treat to somehow find ways to counter misinformation. But we are not very sure what they did, because at the end of the day, what was really happening was something far more bizarre. It was not just checking, we don't know what kind of facts they were checking and whether the outcome was any better than the facts that they checked. So it has been a bit of a stretch out here. But I can tell you that the AI war which has taken place, which still continues because Mr. Trump continues to say that the war is still on and the ceasefire is there and maybe hopefully it will get over, has made media somehow rather very strained in many ways. So the only thing that really anchors reality is what is it called? The television, the reporters and the press photographers. They are the only ones who are anchored, because if you look at it, this is a war where there are no images. There is no recall of any image coming out of it. It's a very strange war that has taken place, but that is what is antithetical to much of what journalism stands for. Thank you. So I want to also bring to the fore that some contribution of people who have not been here, because Editors Guild is an all India organization. So there are individuals who, from a long distance, curating the entire process. There's Krishna Prasad, formerly the editor of Outlook, and also who's worked in the Hindu also for a while, and other publications, who was putting together all the names and working very hard on this. He's not here. Then General Secretary of Editors Guild, Raghavan Srinivasan, he was also actively involved and he lost his father, so he's not here. And there have been many other people. I mean, Bilal has been very active also in putting together. And I would also want to thank Kumkum Chadda, who's not just tirelessly run around to get people and to give shape to the event, but she's done a lot more. Thank you, everybody. So now I'll hand over the mic to Siddharth Varadarajan, who doesn't really need introduction. Bilal will tell.
Actually, uh, so as we know that whether this AI serves as a disruptor, destroyer, or a facilitator, we'll examine this throughout the day, and we'll get from Siddharth ji, is a founding editor of The Wire, give us a dual perspective. Uh, as an owner, as a journalist, both. So this perspective is quite important to understand how AI is impacting newsrooms. We talk about the wars, we are also in a war with AI. How to utilize this, monster and how to tame it is what we'll get this perspective from Siddharth ji.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bilal. Thank you, Sanjay Kapoor, and all the office holders and colleagues at Editors Guild of India for convening this event and inviting me. I must begin with a slight expression of discomfort because we are being asked to deliberate on how journalism should be reimagined, quote unquote, in this time of artificial intelligence. While journalism has certainly sought to, and has always done so, to use the latest technology and tools of every era to sharpen its craft and make its work better and more effective, this was, at the end of the day, always a process of harnessing technology in the service of journalism rather than of reimagining it. When I joined the Times of India as a leader writer in 1995, and I'm sure others who have spent long years in the profession will have similar stories to tell, I was asked, literally, I joined very low down in the food chain on the editorial page, and initial assignments, I had to look after letters to the editor. And I was careful not to offer editorial suggestions or things to write, except in areas that I was really very, very familiar with. Perhaps the first piece I wrote was about, I think it was the anniversary of the 11th anniversary of the 1984 massacres. And so that was a topic that I had studied and knew very well, so I volunteered to write, and I was very happy the Times when they asked me to write on that. But there comes a time when, in an editorial page meeting in a group, topics get thrown up where, because of who turns up for work that day and what people's different perceptions are, you get assigned to write stories or write an editorial, not just go out there and report. You get. So I was told one fine day that elections had happened in Cambodia, and Hun Sen had won yet again, and we wanted, today's a bit of a dull day as far as what's happening in India is concerned. So we wanted a second editorial on what the victory of Hun Sen means. So there's no Google, there's nothing. And you also want to know, okay, what is it that the Times of India, what view has the Times of India taken editorially on Hun Sen and Cambodia in the past? You don't really want to deviate from that. So the technology in those days was you went down to the basement and you looked for a kindly old librarian and you said ki mujhe Cambodia pe editorial likhna hai. And he would rummage around these copious shelves and cupboards, and he'd come up with a file which had the clippings and cuttings of Cambodia for the last 5 years, including editorials the Times of India had written. And then you basically studied that and came up with some view, and then you wrote what you wrote. Now, colleagues of mine at a similar level in say North America in those days, I'm talking of 95, 96, would have had access to, I would say these were pre-internet search tools. LexisNexis, for example. I don't know how many of you have ever used. Those of you who have been to, I think it still exists in some shape or form, LexisNexis or ProQuest, and where you basically are able to pull up news articles from going back a long period. But literally a year later, by 96 actually, Google search became ubiquitous for journalists everywhere. Now, of course, computers had already made writing easier. I joined well after typewriters had gone. So from the word go, one wrote by computer. It also made typesetting easier. No more compositors or typesetters sweating it out over hot metal press and so on. It was all done on desktop computers. Speaking of technology and tools, Microsoft Excel spreadsheets made or allowed those among us who were business journalists, it allowed business reporters to analyze complex financial data much faster than they might otherwise have been able to do. Along the way, we acquired access to email, to communicate with sources far away. We got cell phones. Email also allowed us to file stories from far away. No more queuing up outside Srinagar post office to send a telex message and wondering whether the fellow who's reading it will let your message go or not go. Now you just load an email and send it off. Some things that we got were not strictly technological, but we got RTI. And then there was things like mapping, geospatial tools. Satellite imagery now is quite common to access in many newsrooms. And by the turn of the century, but I would say really by 2005, 2006, certainly by the time I joined the Hindu, which was in 2004, 4-5, I would say by 6 or 7, social media, the explosion of Twitter, for example, created for us, whatever other use you may make of Twitter, created for us the category of OSINT, open source intelligence. So very easily as reporters or journalists, you could access information from around the world. Of course, this was information that you had to be able to verify, you had to be able to assess and to check. But these are all sort of tools, or technology-driven tools. Sorry, I thought my phone was silent. These are all tools, technology, but they had one thing in common, which was that, and earlier generations would probably have, when tape recorders first made their appearance, cameras, but all of these technological developments had journalists at the center of the revolution. And it was up to journalists to use their judgment in such a way that these tools created for us, these tools gave us the ability to create better content. So I had access to Google. What use I made of Google was really entirely up to me as a journalist, as a creator, as an editor. How you use search, how you use other forms of technology, even RTI, how you use RTI. It required the conscious act of a journalist or an editor going out there deploying technology in order to do better journalism. So there was no reimagining journalism. I mean, the tool, the essence of our tradecraft remained the same. And what we were doing was really the act of harnessing technology, so that we use our tradecraft to do the work that we do and do it better, do it faster, do it more accurately. And I think journalists around the world made a pretty good job of it. With the advent of AI, and incidentally, forms of AI were common even in those days. Right? The first time you got a sophisticated, the first time you typed a story in word processing, using Microsoft Word or other, software, you very quickly discovered that there was an automatic spell check. Within a few years of doing that, many of these word processing softwares had the ability to make simple grammatical suggestions. if you were getting your tense wrong, if you were getting singular plural wrong. This was a form of AI. And but what's different about the era we are in today is generative AI. The ability for artificial intelligence to create content that is independent of us, create content without us. This is what is new. And it's something that is qualitatively different from the kinds of technologies, the kinds of innovations and tools that we encountered in the past. It is so radical in some ways, so sweeping, and evolving so fast. What generative AI is today was not what it was even 6 months ago. We are able to do things with it that were hard to imagine. But the first time you ever logged into ChatGPT, and I'm sure for many of you that was perhaps not even going further back than a year or year and a half. The ability for generative AI engines to perform tasks for you was limited, but has grown by leaps and bounds. So today you have a situation where, and we'll see examples of this, of generative AI, and of course the challenge for us is to say, okay, fine, rather than reimagining my work in the face of this technology, which is very powerful, very dangerous, how can I go back to thinking of harnessing it? So AI, generative AI, instead of forcing ourselves to reimagine what journalism is and looks like, is there a better option for us to say, look, what journalism is, we know. The task of journalism is very clear. We know the tradecraft. Can I, as I did in the past when I first encountered Google, can I harness AI, generative AI, to in a way that makes our work easier, faster, better? And I think this is the problem that we confront. And it is my belief that we, as journalists and editors, have to address this question head on. Newsrooms, newsroom leaders, editors do not have the luxury of saying, well, this is not my problem. This is a first world problem. I've come across small newsrooms around the country, even large ones, that say, well, we're carrying on the way we were. Yes, we hear about what AP is doing with AI. We hear about what the New York Times is doing with AI, but none of that concerns us. And the bad news is that it does concern you. Because AI use by AP or the New York Times is at one level, but AI use is all around us now. And whether you like it or not, it is muddying the terrain for journalism in ways that all of you are very familiar with. So it's my belief that as journalists and editors, we have to address this question of harnessing AI for journalism head on. And we have to do this fast. Because otherwise the march of AI will wreak havoc on journalism. It already is in some ways. And with it, and this also we need to bear in mind, because ours is not a profession that is, out there simply to provide jobs for us. It's, the work that journalists do is linked to the basic health of the public sphere. It's linked to the nature and health of the polity. So if we allow AI to undermine journalism, then you can be sure that this is also going to undermine the public sphere, civil society, and wider institutions, and the very nature of our polity. So, placing my reservations about the use of the word reimagining, I know that the EGI people didn't think of this as chucking up, of radical reimagining. Basically, it's a question of how you use this. So I would like to thank EGI for convening today's event. I know that there have been conversations at the Guild, but also with other journalist bodies. I think India and Indian media organizations are a little bit behind the curve. I've been part of conversations abroad over the last 2 years or 3 years. AI is the one topic that animates media organizations across the world. There's a lot of work that's happening. And as you can imagine, this work is not just being done by media organizations or sort of, shall we say, NGOs or think tanks that are concerned about the future of journalism. This work is being done by governments. This work is being done by civil society, thankfully. This work is also being done by the AI companies themselves. So you have a whole bunch of interested stakeholders who are looking at AI, looking at the impact of AI on journalism, some with a view to seeing how journalism can be improved, others with a view to saying how journalism can be replaced. Governments in some parts of the world looking at the whole AI debate and thinking, how can we use this for our party political purposes? How can we use AI to better control and regulate media that we don't like? So you can see the beginnings, you see it in this country, where a singular focus on the harms that AI is causing, say with deep fakes, is being used as the thin end of the wedge to then foist new restrictions, new regulations, draconian kind of laws that are intended to penalize journalism. Right? So this is a conversation that we really need to have started a few years ago. Der Aay Durust Aay. And EGI has done well, and I would urge that this be the first of many, many such interactions. And I think involving, and as you'll see from the very basic thoughts that I put together, you will see the need to reach out to newsrooms and individual editors, journalists who are using AI, so that we can all better understand and appreciate what exactly the pros and cons of this are. I have to flag also at the outset that yes, I am an owner, quote unquote, but Sanjay and Bilalji and I'm not an owner in the traditional sense, and as one of 3 co-founders of a non-profit media. Ownership came to us by choice, but also because we took the view back in 2014, 2015 that if independent media has to survive, it can't do so if it is going to depend on the financial goodwill of promoters and angel investors, and because they are going to be the thin underbelly of press freedom. And I think we've been proven correct to a large extent. We have done well and survived and flourished as a non-profit, I think, precisely because we ourselves own and run the organization. What this also means, of course, is that coming from a journalistic background and running something as a non-profit also means that our perspective is not, we don't strictly have that bean counting perspective. That idea that sometimes I feel we should be more financially disciplined and robust, and but essentially when I look at AI and the use of AI in the newsroom, for me the primary objective is not to cut cost. I believe we already run a fairly lean newsroom as far as costs are concerned. But rather unlike, so to that extent, I would be different from, say, the owner of the Jagran or Bennett Coleman or any of our large, big media organizations. And that is a conversation that I think one needs to have. EGI, perhaps with the INS and other media organizations, I think it's important to have this conversation with owners, quote unquote. Because what we don't want is a situation, of course, it's inevitable with the march of technology that there will be job losses. I mentioned earlier the transition from manual physical typesetting to desktop publishing. This literally led to the loss of hundreds of jobs of people who worked in presses. Lots of typesetters, even sub-editors, so the nature of media jobs has undergone a change because of technology. You can't hold that back entirely. But recognizing what AI can do and what it can't do, and that's what I want to focus on next, is a conversation that we need to have, of course, as journalists and editors, but also, I think, with the owners and proprietors. So I do hope that this conversation will be taken further with them. Now, how are media organizations around the world using AI? All of you have come across anecdotal evidence. I found a recent report by Reuters, by the Reuters Institute, particularly useful because they are a survey-based. Let me see if I can pull up the. I don't have it on my screen. Essentially, Reuters, the Reuters Institute did a whole bunch of surveys. It's okay, don't worry about it. Rishad, I'll tell you later. They surveyed editors, reporters in newsrooms around the world to understand the extent to which AI is being used, how it is being used, the pros and cons, etc. And what I'm going to say broadly reflects the findings of the Reuters survey, and also I'm going to add other information of my own. But essentially what I'm going to do is focus on how newsrooms are using it. In other words, what's the positive? And what are the harms that AI can do, and which we're already seeing evidence of. And let me start with the harms, actually, because this is more apparent. And the first harm is the decline in search referrals, thanks to AI, and thus a slowing down and even decline in site traffic. So the traditional method of digital media for discovery, for finding readers, has been to use, to have our stories surface in search. And, search either through search engines or search on social media. What's happening in a very marked way, if you've noticed, if you use search regularly as your first point of, use, your first sort of act of information gathering, if you're looking at some topic, you would have noticed now the first few results, or the main result that gets thrown up at you from Google, for example, invariably reflects not a link to a particular site, which would have the information that you want. So you're looking for the let's say you're curious about US, Pakistan, Iran, China, this whole dialogue process, and you want to understand what are the similarities between what Trump and Vance are doing and what Nixon tried to do in talking to an adversary using Pakistan as a go-between. Pre-AI, chances are that your search would have surfaced Dr. Harish Khare's article in The Wire, where he wrote about what are the lessons Vance can learn from Kissinger. And that would come up as result number one. You click on it, you read it. What happens now is you're getting Gemini's summary. So it looks at your prompt, converts it into a kind of AI research task, and synthesizes a bunch of content. Of course, it links to other things. So it's possible that there would be a link to Dr. Khare's article somewhere, but that link is not upfront. You have to go through 2 or 3 clicks before you come to that. And Gemini has already subsumed it into Gyan of its own. And what we are finding as a news organization is that this process of the AIification of search referrals has across the board affected traffic. And there is no easy, at one level you could say, well, we're just paying for the sins of our own laziness. We should never have been over-reliant on search mechanisms that are controlled by others. The flip side of that is for a small organization like The Wire, which doesn't really have money to advertise or to publicize, search, social media referrals, all of this was a very easy, cheap, virtually costless way of scaling up in terms of reach. So no regrets there. We were conscious of the limitations of this. We are conscious of the harm that the AIification of search is doing. And we are trying to come up with ways of direct contact with readers. That was always the kind of holy grail. How can you get your target audience to come to you directly without the mediation of the search engine Brahmin? And, so now the use of newsletters, the use of video. Interestingly, and this is not just in India, universally publishers are finding that traffic through Google, through social media is falling. But other forms of traffic, mediated traffic, YouTube, for example, Instagram is growing. So there's something about AI and the way in which it is altering the way people consume content that what it takes away with one hand, we are getting opportunities with the other. But again, I would say this is of limited duration. It's, potentially it will also saturate. So this decline in search referrals and the consequent decline in revenue, because many platforms, the classic business model was you generate content, and this content shows up in search, you get traffic. That traffic then leads to ad revenue because of advertising that you carry. And you had whole platforms coming up based purely and simply on this kind of a model. That model is, I don't think it was a very great model to begin with. We never relied on it, certainly. But for many for-profit media organizations, this was a cheap, easy way for you to do business, and that has gotten undermined. The third harm is that AI is contributing to the exponential rise in misinformation and disinformation, which was, of course, always or already a problem to begin with, thanks to political IT cells and Godi media. But AI is allowing this to be done on a, shall we say, industrial scale. So the ability to fabricate information, not just to misinform, but to actively disinform. And then you have the use of deep fakes. And we are seeing evidence of deep fakes surfacing even as intelligence operations of hostile powers. So, for example, in the aftermath of Pakistan's peacemaking between the US and Iran, some of you would have come across deepfake videos of politicians, news anchors in India speak. It looks as if they are speaking. Like, I think I saw a video of this guy Shivarur, who's normally a kind of pro-government anchor, and you had a video of him saying how Modi government has done very badly, and Pakistan has done so great, and it was a very skillfully done deepfake video. There was a video put out perhaps 6 months ago of the army chief. Again, making statements that anybody who understands the army and understands Indian politics would know immediately that this is impossible. So the first time somebody shared that video link with me, it was clear that this is bullshit. But lots of people were fooled. And so the use of deepfakes to spread disinformation, this is a very clear example of. Now again, this is the technological expression of an older problem. In Tsarist Russia, I'm talking of more than 100 years ago, the Tsarist regime, in order to justify its anti-Jewish pogroms, fabricated a book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, in order to show that there was a great Jewish conspiracy and so on and so forth. And copies of this booklet were circulated and people believed it to be true. So there's always been the use of technology, printing presses, television, photographs, audio recordings are now AI. But the way in which this is happening, the scale, the pace, the depth of it is something which is truly new. I've been asked to conclude. I'm just going to speed through what I have, my other points. One consequence of this that we all confront, no matter how responsible we are is that there is a lowering of public trust in media across the board. So yes, there are media organizations that are doing terrible things with AI, but this is kind of ruining the terrain for everybody, because there is a measurable decline in public trust as far as media is concerned. You also have media content, and this is another harm. Content that we produce getting ripped off by large language models. So the harvesting of information put out by news organizations. This is another problem that we confront. How are media organizations around the world using AI? Well, analysis of data sets, official documents, much easier. I get a legal judgment, a PDF, a 350-page judgment from the Supreme Court, sent to me by a lawyer saying, hey, this is interesting, take a look. I have 5 minutes. How do I plow through 350 pages of terrible legalese that the Indian courts produce? But I don't have that time. And I've experimented with this. I would urge all of you to do so, but with caution. Feed the PDF into your generative AI engine of choice, and you get a fairly workable summary. So being able to do a speed read or a first stab at a complex document, data, and I'm speaking just of my own example from 2 or 3 days ago. I wanted to run this exercise before others. Everybody had the same idea, so everybody was doing it. So you saw other media doing the same thing. But I was curious to know, okay, if we take the current Lok Sabha and reconfigure this Lok Sabha on the basis of what these bills say, which is that you're equalizing the constituency size per population, so that every constituency represents the same number of people, and you were to then apportion seats in an 850 house Lok Sabha, what would the distribution of seats look like? In the even a year ago, you'd have to manually calculate using a calculator, take notes. Here, literally, I threw the question out at Claude and was able to get the answer in minutes. And then, of course, there are glitches because the answer, it was the first instinct was to immediately take 10 states and give them 0 MPs. Because they were below the threshold. And I said, well, this is not allowed. Every state has to have at least 1. And I said, there's an assurance that no state will suffer, so no state can lose a seat. So states with 2, give them 2, even if the population doesn't warrant it. So then, with a little bit of to and fro, you get a chart in 10 minutes, right? So this ability to analyze data, great plus point. Preparing transcripts, translations, summaries. Editing, although there I would say caution is needed because there is a certain flattening out. And incidentally, as somebody who gets a lot of op-eds, I am now 90% able to figure out when op-ed writers have used ChatGPT to write, ChatGPT to edit. You see a certain repetition of phrases, structures. I'm not sure I can explain this very easily, but you know it when you see it. I know it when I see it now. And so there is a certain flattening out of quality, but editing is also happening. Many newsrooms are using AI to generate headlines and summaries with a view to SEO. All of this, by and large, I would say so far so good, provided there is a human in the loop. You can't leave it to pure tech. Whatever the output that you generate from AI, if you don't have a human reviewing that, you're going to be in deep trouble. But some organizations have some journalists have gone further, and this is what I believe a disturbing trend, using AI to write stories. This, you don't need me to tell you this, you've seen examples of this, can get you into all kinds of trouble. Just last month, there was a scandal. New York Times published a book review by Alex Preston, where he used, I think, Anthropic to, he claimed to summarize, he said I gave ideas to it and it summarized something for me. And essentially, what this ChatGPT generated product did was to lift paragraphs word for word from a review of the same book that had appeared in The Guardian. Right? So this guy who pretty much his career is screwed because, you search his name and you're going to come up with examples of him plagiarizing. And, you can say my intern did it, you can say my AI did it, but at the end of the day, it goes out with your byline. right? So this is a highly risky thing. You also have hallucinations. I'm sure you've confronted this, where information is surfaced that is just fabricated, doesn't exist. References are fabricated, they don't exist. So this, and I just want to use, there's a paragraph from, there's a Center for News, Technology and Innovation. I'm on the board of this kind of think tank, which is looking at questions of AI, among other things. And in a recent paper they produced, there's a para I want to read, which summarizes very well why using AI to generate editorial content is deeply problematic. And I quote, "The use of generative AI tools to create news stories presents a series of challenges around providing fact-based information to the public. Not only do AI tools include false or entirely made-up information, but they are also confidently wrong, creating convincingly high-quality content and offering authoritative arguments for inaccurate information. To date, licensing deals have largely failed to improve this challenge. Distinguishing between legitimate and illegitimate content, or even satire, is becoming increasingly difficult, particularly as counter-AI tools have so far been mostly ineffective. Further, it is easy to produce AI-generated images or content which can be exploited by spammers who churn out AI-generated news content, or anti-democratic actors who create scalable and potentially persuasive propaganda and disinformation. While it is clear that automation offers many opportunities to improve news efficiency and innovation, it also risks further commoditizing and undermining public trust in news," unquote. There's also the issue, incidentally, of bias in LLMs. So large language models essentially are only as good as the data that they've harvested. And if the data out there is Eurocentric, if there is ethnocentrism that involved in the broader sense in terms of, prioritizing certain kinds of knowledge over others, the LLM is going to reflect that. So the challenge for small newsrooms, and I'm going to end on this point really and just show you a couple of examples. Can we use AI for grunt work? The hard task of calculating, recalculating, transcribing, summarizing, and then freeing reporters and editors to focus on the journalistic tasks that AI really can't do, such as investigative journalism. Again, the FT survey found that as AI, and I'm reading from the summary of it, IFJ, the International Federation of Journalists, noted this from the Reuters report. As AI accelerates the commodification of news, publishers are responding by leaning into what machines struggle to replicate. The survey points to a decisive pivot away from generic, service-oriented content towards journalism rooted in originality, depth, and authority. News publishers now plan to boost investment in original investigations. 91% of editors surveyed by Reuters said this, and contextual analysis, that is 82%, while cutting back on general news that chatbots can easily reproduce. So newsrooms around the world are already recognizing the limits to what AI has done and identifying that the future of journalism lies in pivoting away from AI slop towards stuff that requires boots on the ground. And, for us, and I just want to show if, Rishabh, you can put up slide number 1.
Can I just interrupt, Siddharth?
Yeah.
What we can, because this is a very interesting information that we all need to understand, particularly this Reuters report. Can we, because Sanket has to leave.
Okay, just literally 1 minute.
No, because this needs to be elaborated.
Yeah.
Because this information glut and how to filter out, how to actually, because this information is quite relevant. We can come back and then start this again.
Actually, literally just 1 minute. I'll just run through these examples. Huh?
Sure.
Yeah, just 1 minute. So this is a story that we did. Delimitation of Assam makes no geographical sense. Just scroll up and down. You can see it's kind of text heavy. There's some graphics, there's maps, etc. in it. Hard to read, hard to digest. Go to the next slide. A colleague of mine used AI coding and now scroll down slowly. Took him, I think, 2 hours to render the same story in an interactive format. Generating, using the same content of that story. Literally took him a couple of hours. And that was his first step. Let's go to the next one. I had a colleague build, again using coding with help from AI, which was taking a whole load of West Bengal data and creating an interactive dashboard that readers could then plug in, choose a constituency of their choice, and figure out the nature of the exclusions, what percentage were being excluded based on constituencies being Muslim dominated, Dalit dominated, so on and so forth. Next one. There's a piece which I will share the link with. The GIJN did a very good report on how the Hindu is embedding AI into its data journalism. And there's a very good line from Ramani saying that we're using AI not to generate prose, but to actually use AI to analyze election data. Next slide. And also they actually used AI to build simple hardware to measure heat sensitivity in Chennai for working people. Is there one more? That's it, right? Yeah, that's it. So I'm going to stop. These are just examples of the innovative use of AI that we have done, that Hindu has done, others have done. There are lots of other examples. And so the good with the bad. But essentially, I would say, as a closing point, that we are not the only ones confronting the reality of AI. There's a wider debate. We need to connect to that debate. But the sooner we get our own house in order and in understanding this, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharthji. So, as we all are aware that editors actually would decide what to serve to the public. Now it is the algorithm through personalization, that is the term is used in AI, that now decides what to serve to public. So we have another session. The theme of the session is how to keep journalism front and center of AI-enabled newsrooms. So Sanket Upadhyay, founder Double Check, would basically give us insight on how on-air talent gets support from AI-enabled newsroom. So there used to be moderators, sitting producers. Now I think you have AI-enabled TP. You have AI-enabled a lot of things that are integrated into the CMS systems. Over to you, Sangetji.
Sure. Thank you very much, Bilal sir. I think most of us have already experienced AI in every form, and I think it's safe to conclude that. Sorry? You're accusing a television journalist of not being loud enough. So, all of us have experienced AI in various forms, and as Siddharth was also mentioning, you see, we all use it. So, obviously, like any new technology, there will be a risk and there will be a reward, right? And as of now, while we use it for the rewards that it gives us, we are, and very reasonably so, greeting it with skepticism also. And it is only fair. Hallucination of AI is a real problem, right? And it's not just about small newsrooms where it has really, really enabled us to dream big, but even in the bigger newsrooms, this is very efficiently used. And as you go along, I feel the technology itself will evolve, it will course correct, and since these are language learning models, LLMs, the rate at which they are correcting themselves is alarming. The problem is the rate at which they will cause a potential problem is also alarming. So that speed has to be matched. Now, in the context of journalism, you see, this is a larger point. You will have lawyers, as Siddharth was mentioning, who would, in fact, there are many judgments there are stories of judgments being written using AI. So this is a whole new problem. People use it for all sorts of things. It does the job of an Excel. You want an Excel sheet, complicated numbers, simplified. It will do all of that. In the context of journalism, I feel, well, let's begin with the positives first. And speaking of personal experience, it has really, really made my life very easy. Now, journalists can imagine doing a lot more than what they could earlier, because they would have required a greater amount of human resource. They would have required a greater amount of capital investment. Now, all of that can be done at a fraction of a cost. I'll give you an example of a device which I'm sure most of the broadcasting journalists here may have used. It's called StreamYard. Now, StreamYard is a tool which essentially on a computer browser gives me the capability of being a production control room, an anchor, a studio director, a sound man, a producer, all rolled into one for about 2,000 rupees a month. Now imagine if I were to have spent all this money on actual hardware. The production control room alone in a television setup costs upwards of what? The bare minimum, Sonia would know, about 2 crores. That is like the bare minimum quality. And then it goes upwards to 10 crores, 12 crores, and then the cost of the human resource. So this is technology which is using AI so efficiently that I can, sitting in my drawing room, produce very good quality YouTube videos, chat with whoever I want. It's very different from Zoom. Zoom is basically a conversation tool online. This is a production tool online. It's made for broadcast and it uses AI effectively. Bilal Sahab, Wael Sahab and I have done multiple interviews on StreamYard, so he's no stranger to this technology.
Yeah, the pages are ample. You have multiple streams on different platforms.
Exactly. So it makes life really easy. And then within a fraction of my, suppose if I've interviewed Wael Sahab, and then within 5 minutes, I can produce amazing quality reels, because now these days you see producing a long format content is not enough. You need an immediate reel. So in 5 minutes, it's going to summarize what Wael Sahab has said, offer me suggestions that this particular angle may be of high virality. So you can choose to put this on your platform. Now here is where the problems begin. So technology has suggested something to me. Now the onus is on me whether I accept that suggestion or not, which is where the human intervention comes in. So technology has provided with me 10 or 15 or 20 options for which a human resource would take a whole day. This is available to me in 5 minutes, which means obviously there is great speed. But then that human gatekeeper in the form of a journalistic editor, senior producer, that is mandatory. And the more of AI that we will start using, StreamYard is just one tool. I mean, there are endless tools. There is InVideo, where you can edit a whole video. You put in all your raw footage from your shoot, and within 10 odd minutes, it will give you a nicely edited video package. But the point is, should I blindly depend on these tools? No. In the olden times, when there was no AI, would the editor of a publication or a television channel blindly depend on whatever the reporter is saying? No. The editor would step in, ask the reporter. I mean, Sonia knows in our previous organization, the amount of explaining a reporter would have to do as to why he's saying what he's saying. So obviously there was human intervention at the top. So there is premium. Now we can all argue that in due course, since we are eliminating, you see, how does one get that experience to know that this is right and this is not right? Is through experience, because you have lived through things. Sorry? So you have lived through an experience, and that experience over time has become wisdom, which has given you this authority and facility where you can sit in judgment on whether something is right or wrong. So then you can sit in judgment of AI being right or wrong also. You see, as Siddharth mentioned, he can look at copies and figure out that this is cheating, right? By the way, Siddharth, you should know that now there are AI softwares that can introduce human errors into a copy. Even that is available. Further complicates things. So the real challenge for journalism will begin when we will run out, when there will be a generational shift. We will run out of people who are wise enough to perhaps efficiently question what is being provided, in the tools of journalism, or the tricks of journalism, the tricks of the trade. Will the new generation, for instance, someone like, I'm not that new also, but will someone like me, or maybe someone who's in their 30s be intellectually sound to question AI or will become dependent? The flip side of this argument is that since they will be AI natives, they would be able to understand more. I think the need of the hour, and this is going to be my concluding argument, the need of the hour is to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is a brilliant tool. It provides great facility to all us journalists, particularly if you want to start out on your own. It makes the entry point really easy of fulfilling certain entrepreneurial ambitions and taking journalism forward the way you want it. At the same time, with agencies like the Editors Guild of India, with other agencies, it is very important for all of us to be constantly upskilled on the merits and the demerits of AI. How far is too far? What all should you use? Like, for instance, let me give you an example. I will never ever blindly depend. In fact, my organization called Double Check, do you know the name, the idea for the name itself came from Google Gemini. Because every time you search anything, it says AI can make mistakes, kindly double check it. Our journalism, age-old journalism, whether you go in a journalism school, whether you speak to your editors from print, from TV, the seasoned ones, all of them will tell you, is this source-based information that you've got, is it double-checked? Is this double-checked? The answer for journalism and the future of journalism lies in the very basic understanding of how we should be doing our journalism. To double-check. Just double-check and you will know. Everything, don't depend blindly on what it is throwing up. The problem is when you think that it may be right. See, you won't do that with a human resource in your company. No, why do you want to give that liberty to an AI? Don't. And the moment you see, it's smart. It's learning. So each time, and do also know it has confirmation bias. It will never say you are wrong. AI will never say you are wrong. It will always feed into your confirmation bias. If you want something, it will try to give you something related to what you want. All the more reason for us journalists is, and there is no harm in doubting. You don't become a bad person if you doubt what AI is throwing up at you. So doubt, attribute, attributable information and double-checked information is going to be the future with AI. That is what I want to say.
Thank you, Sanketji. Quite insightful. This StreamYard, this is like a multi PCR, where you get the BGs, you play them on different platforms. So as this Michael Schutzson, he's an internet enthusiast, he says that this information glut, which Sanketji was talking about, how to filter it out and process it and serve it to public, which has some sanity. What is it that is getting challenged? That is editorial sovereignty over algorithm dominance. Because it is the algorithm, the AI that is integrated to the newsroom which decides what to serve. As Siddharthji was saying, that what is it that comes to your screen is not what editor decides. It is the algorithm that is designed to serve what it likes. And these reco engines, as we call them, recommendation engines, they have created havoc. So we need moderation in newsrooms. How to, when I was mentioning about Siddharthji as owner, founding editor, what I meant was basically the implementation of these AI tools into the newsroom. So we have TTS, Sanketji is using text-to-speech, ASRs, automated speech recognitions. They are there. You throw the video, it will give you complete text, it will give you transcript. So you had translation experts in the newsrooms. They are jobless because your machines do excellent, and not in just one language, in all the languages. So we are partnering with IIT Madras and IIITH. What they are doing, because these data sets, currently what we are using, these data sets are Western mostly. That's also where the challenge is, because the cultural nuances are missed in these, because all the data sets mostly are not Indian based. There's a, there's far bigger challenges beyond just, editorial judgment, editorial sovereignty. So we'll continue this session we have with us on the same theme, how to keep journalism front and center of AI-enabled newsrooms. As Siddharthji, paraphrased it, how to basically keep journalists at the center of the strategy. So we have with us Pradeep Gairola. He is Chief Digital Business Officer from the Hindu. Please.
Thanks. Thank you, Laji. So thanks, Sanjay, for inviting
Thanks,
me.
Sanket. Yeah, I'm sorry you had a bit of a rush. And Siddharth will come back later. Bilal, will Siddharth come back later?
No, because these are certain things which we need to, yes.
Okay. But we need to have Q&A
Because
after
this deepfake, fakes, all of this,
But we need to have question and answers, no?
yes. I'm there.
After this.
Yeah, questions.
Q&A after everything is over, or what is it?
We can do Q&A once
Okay.
it's over.
Pradeep, please carry on.
So thanks, Sanjay, for inviting me. So among all the editorial people, I'm the odd man out. I'm a salesman who's trying to figure out from last 30-35 years that how do we make journalism sustainable. And it is a tough job because the goalpost keeps changing. So it was in so let me first tell you that Hindu never hired me. I got hired by chasing them that you need to hire me. And like I chased so that time our managing director was Rajiv, and I wrote to him almost like a cold mail saying that I want to meet you and all that, and finally chased him for 6-7 months before they ended up hiring me. So I didn't leave them. So my core idea was that I felt that Hindu is one of the organizations which might be the right target for really going from an advertising revenue to a more reader revenue, because I started seeing this advertising going down very early, because I used to have Times of India between 2008 till 2012. And I was seeing that while there was a lot of glut, this entire journalism of this country was decaying to a ABCD format, which was basically astrology, Bollywood, cricket, and devotion, right? And the journalists and they were just catering to the Google, because which really wanted more velocity, more and more updates. Even if you don't have anything to say, just say that okay, so if there is a Sushant Singh writing, you can talk about his dog also, and then also the Google will reward you. So it was getting absurd. So I somehow started feeling, and Hindu was not doing that at that point in time. So I started feeling that there is an opportunity, and finally, long story short, I got hired. And in 2000, so Hindu started experimenting with subscription somewhere in 2014, when they started, they had put their e-paper behind the paywall. But e-paper was a smaller risk because it didn't get traffic from the digital, right? Or rather the social media. It was not something which can be crawled. E-paper is basically a PDF. So so it cannot be crawled by Googles and all that. So that's where the challenge was. So in 2019, February 2019, we became the first mainstream news organization of this country to really take to build paywall around Hindu. At that point in time, a lot of people wrote about obituary, but luckily we survived. So see, while we are discussing that, about the AI in the newsroom, I think whichever young journalist I see in our organization, they all are using it. There's no exception to this rule. Right? And people who are using it as an intern, they are the ones who are very happy with it. In the end of this presentation, I have put in, which Rishabh, you can circulate to the team members, lots and lots of errors done by some of the biggest newsroom in the world. Siddharth talked about New York Times, there's a Washington. I think it will be difficult to find, and I'm reasonably sure that even we would have done some errors in. I think there's no exception to this rule that anybody who has used AI has made blunders, whether it is a Bloomberg, whether it's a Washington Post. So because of the shortage of time, I've just put all that as a part of the reference part of this, and you can go through it and try to figure out, because there's also a lot of learning material in that. So I think, it is if you use as an intern, it's a great place to begin with. But I somehow feel that AI is a continuation. I feel AI is really a very, very big boon to the journalism as an industry, or the news as an industry. I feel that this is the biggest thing, biggest careers will be made by building your bylines, and bylines are built by distinctness, right? Sorry? By having a distinct way, when you read something, so there's a very interesting story. So there is this editor, the person who retired as a cartoon editor of New Yorker, which is almost the topmost you can reach as a cartoon by this, right? So he used to write to New Yorker every. So he wanted his cartoon to publish in New Yorker. So he started sending them. He will get rejection. So then his friend said, "Why don't you send it in 10 each?" So he started sending in 10 each. Then also rejection. Then finally he started putting all of it in his room, saying that, okay, this rejected. Finally, the rejection was so much that it entered his washroom. Okay, but this guy didn't give up. After 2 years of rejection, then he finally said that, okay, one day he went to the library and put up, what is there? He realized that he draws better than most of the cartoons which are publishing in New Yorker. He realized that his graphics. Then finally, after 4 or 5 days of research, he realized he liked distinctness. And then he sent one cartoon to New Yorker, which got published. And later on, he ended up becoming, I'm forgetting his name, so if you'll have to just Google it, you'll find him. So that is what is the distinctness which I talk about. I think there were 3 liberation to journalism. And the 4th, I think, might be around revenue, which is something which has not yet happened. I think the first liberation was in 90s. When see, before that, if you were a journalist and you wanted to publish something, you needed a huge organization because the machine capex was huge. If you put up a big plant, it runs in crores. Then there was a newsprint, right? And so basically it was impossible. If you are independent journalist, there was no way you could have really taken your content and put it in this, right? So in this era, if you will see internet, the publishing got liberated and people could start. If in this era, a lot of blogs came in, right? So even some of them, like so basically the cost of publication almost became zero from where it used to cost crores and crores, right? So this was I think that this is what internet did to the publishing. At that point in time, if you see, there are some still players like Drudge Report, or for that Nick Denton, who created Gawker Media and was later on closed by one of the rich man who didn't like what he did to him, right? We also saw Huffington Post, Salon, Slate. So many of the publication came, and none of them were from the big media houses. They were done by the journalists who started experimenting with becoming entrepreneurs, right? And we also see the making of kingmakers like WordPress or a blogger and all that, which really could benefit from a lot of work the journalists were doing, and also added to the democratization of the journalism as a profession. However, if you write and you are not seen, then it is just like writing a diary, right? So I think that problem got solved by search and social, right? So now on a X today also, old Twitter, you write something, millions of people following you, right? So that became it started reaching out to people. So this solved the problem for distribution. So you could reach with the search directories, and later Google and all that was started giving a lot of like distribution to the journalists, who could now have 2 elements of it. They don't even need a publishing house to really to take their voices to people, but also can reach people. But then there was still one problem. The problem was basically the production. Before you even go into writing one story, amount of work it goes, right from collecting facts, data, right? Then verifying the data is correct or not, then putting a first draft, then the editors going through it. Then, so the entire process is 15, 16 steps where somebody has to add photos, somebody has to do something, and then your story used to reach, right? So the production was still not liberal. So even if you could create your newsroom, still you needed multiple people in the newsroom to do these functions. And that is the part which AI is going to cut down dramatically, right? So AI does not replace journalists. It removes this invisible labor which was around journalism. Journalism was always, if you go to the last 100 years, you pick up the biggest publication anywhere in the world, they were all journalist entrepreneurs. I go to ACJ, I go to journalist schools, and I said, how many of you want to become entrepreneur? In the class of 30, if you are lucky, 2 or 3 people will raise their hands, right? So I think now we are getting into an opportunity where the profession which was always a journalist entrepreneur may become possible again. But for that, the real question is, who is in charge, right? So in 90s, when the first time we were called that Times of India as a brand or a product, we had a lot of problem because we thought that, we are an institution, right? But over a period of time, I have somehow now learned that yes, journalism is a product which people buy, right, or consume. So today I'm more comfortable with a word like a product or a brand, which I was not when I was in 90s doing my, with my news organization. So overall, as long as the journalists are, journalism is the product and AI is a platform, and till then we have a thing. But also remember one thing: if your core product is weak, then a strong multiplier only amplifies mediocrity. What the distributors did in between, if in the earlier era, if you will see, if you launched a big product and you did a lot of advertising, and if it was a bad product, it's due to get killed. But the Googles of the world distributor became so powerful that they could really continue with the bad product and continued really doing it. And now I'll be talking about it later, that how the world is changing for them as well now, right? So basically, if your product is weak, as Siddharth was talking about, we gave our audiences to them. So if you see all the Google's face, everybody had a foundation of journalism. Unfortunately, the first floor became theirs and we were the second floor. Okay. Now the first floor, whenever it shakes, we get nightmares, right? But we have to trust that yes, foundation is ours and maybe there might be an opportunity. So here is simply thing, like which I feel that if you have good journalism, right, it will really, AI will help you. Future is basically, it has to be journalism first, AI enabled. Any future this is AI first is not going to cut ice. So now I'll talk about a bit of a Hindu group and what we have been doing with the AI. Siddharth spoke about one of the stories which we are doing, but I will take 2 or 3 angles. One is the reporter angle. So we have a colleague called Arundeep. So when AI Summit was happening in February, he realized that he is the only business journalist from Hindu and Delhi. And AI Summit at one point in time was having 10 to 12 simultaneous tracks, and there was no way he could have covered. So what he did, he tried to reach out. So he tried figuring out how he can use Claude and other AI and thing. And unfortunately for him, AI Summit was not optimized for AI. They had kept mic for the public and the people were talking, and that was all AI. So if it would have worked if it was very clear that the mics were limited, it was not for public, and the noise would not have got captured. But his entire work failed miserably there, right? And he had to do whatever way he could report. But then the larger part of it, he realized that yes, it can help me. Then what he did? Yesterday he was showing me a small product which he has built, which is basically goes to file RTI on his behalf. He wanted to do one story, and then when he wanted to file that story, he realized that he has to file some 56 RTIs. Then he created a product using, now he has to only sit, he gets a OTP, he puts the OTP and the RTI gets filed, 10 rupees per RTI I think is the cost, right? And so this is one solution he has done. Second, he has to, because he's a single person and he has to do all this gazette, what all changes happen. So he has built this that whenever the gazette scripts, the gazettes comes to him. So, and remember that, like these are the people who are here not coders. They are very simple people who, with a journalism background. But this is what, so now he is able to use it for his reporting. Though his first experiment failed, but then failure also created an opportunity for the success. Siddharth talked about our newsroom using our data, but what I am really proud of is the SIR work they did. So what happened were 2.2 crore reports. So when the Supreme Court asked the ECI to publish the data of people that are missed, there were 2.2 crore records which were pushed as a PDF, and that PDF was was images. So your first thing was that you have to, OCR has to take the images, convert into text, then you have to create multiple, then you have, databases, then you have to query those databases, right? And find, as he was saying, in some places, suppose women were missing, some places, one particular religion is missing, and all that kind of a thing. And Hindu published many stories in this series, right? And our work was recognized by, Supreme Court made some changes, ECI made some changes. So a lot of good work happened, right? Because of this work which was done. And of course, the overall, whether it was Bihar and Tamil Nadu or West Bengal, these were the work which was done. And I don't think this was possible. And they did not like a one line of code. That is what you have to understand. Not a one line of code was written. Though Srinivas Ramani was actually a computer engineer who was so fascinated with journalism that when he was working in Infosys, he started doing journalism from IGNOU. And finally, I think, he did his PhD from JNU. So but he had forgotten all about it. He can't write a single line of code, right? But his curiosity remained. And that's the reason he started putting this AI in our newsrooms. some about 5-7 years back. We have now hired even a coder in our newsrooms, and we are experimenting with this, and that is the result which you see here. So a lot of people, these young people, like people, they are experimenting a lot, and the organization is benefiting. This is another story which Siddharth had also touched upon. In this story, what they wanted to understand was that what happens with heat and humidity. So what they did, they assembled 4 devices, okay, which were hardware. The entire cost story would have been some 20,000 rupees costed us. And these hardwares were put on to different people. One of them was cook, one of them was the auto rickshaw guy, then and tried to look at what is the humidity and heat they face during the full day. Have you ever imagined when हम एक ढाबे में जाके खाना खाते हैं और हर तंदूरी रोटी उतारने के लिए वो बंदा अपना सर डालता है ऑलमोस्ट और रोटी निकालता है. Have you ever thought that how much, and this is the most sensitive part of our body, right? It is supposed to be, जब भी आपका जो आपको बीमार होते हैं, जब भी आपका सबसे ज़्यादा बुखार चढ़ता है तो पहली चीज़ आपके सर पे या तो पानी की पट्टी डालते हैं, पानी डाल देते हैं. And उसमें रोज के रोज 365 days, one person enters the tandoor, takes out a roti for you, puts up a roti for us, right? Those are the kind of sensitivities which could not have been traced if we. So this machine was capturing data every 10 seconds. Now imagine the data, अगर आप 24 hours को 10 seconds पे divide करते हो, the quantum of data you have, right? So based on this story, Tamil Nadu government has made some certain changes on the various people. They have also created some AC rooms and all that for the people, that gig workers for low. So these are the changes which can happen if the journalists do their work properly. Or can. These are another example which we have used here. We have not, though in this particular case, what we do is that we do a lot of long form is done by us. On our app, if you will just go and press that second button, which is AI, so it will give you an AI summary out of it. Initially, we really were very worried because we had a policy of human in loop, and this was the first time, and that policy was made 1.5 months later. We were breaking that policy. Now there's no human in loop for creating AI summary. But then we were very sure about the content we have written. And a lot of training happened to the machines and all that. And finally now and we also had some errors in it. It is not that it went without the errors. But today we have a fairly high level of this. So if you use a Hindu app, you have to just press this button and a long form article. So what we realize the human behavior is, today we have so much of information that it is impossible to read everything. So people first sample whether I would like to commit my time to this particular article. So summary actually helps you to make a decision, right, whether you would like to really read this article or not. So if you will see the research, the data also says that 30% of the premium article consumption increase, right, and the monthly active users interacting also increase for us, right. So this is one of the good use cases where the AI is used as a explainer. बिलाल जी मैं अपने टाइम पे खत्म करूंगा, टेंशन मत कीजिएगा. इस केस में हमने क्या किया कि e-paper में, because again the e-paper there are a lot of our we do a lot of long form editorials and all that. Anybody can pick up, press a button and can get a editorial podcast on these editorial articles that we do. In this case, what we realized was that again we wanted to experiment with the short form, the kind of like you guys have seen, what is that in shorts kind of a model, right? So again, all these stories are written in the long form, but this is created through AI, and it again works as a thing. So if you will please read full article, if you see in the bottom, you will go to the article. Again, the commitment towards taking to read was tried in other way. In one case we tried summaries. In this case we are trying it with images and trying to see which works better, so that we can scale that up. So see, मुझे जो सबसे अच्छी खुशी जो लगती है AI के साथ is this possibility of a one-man person newsroom. We are already saying in the US, Europe, lot of places this one-person newsroom is coming in, right? So basically, now a journalist can research, produce, distribute, and the AI can help them to scale it up, right? This was, so this is basically a return of the individual journalist. If you go to the history of journalism, you will see most of the time there were this 1 or 2 people who actually started that news organization. चाहे वो दैनिक भास्कर के द्वारका प्रसाद अग्रवाल जी लीजिए, चाहे आप जागरण लीजिए, चाहे आप हिंदू के वो 6 नौजवान लीजिए जो कि जो है ना जिन्होंने all came together, all in colleges and all that. So there was all this, there was this small people who brought out this news revolution. It was never, the news revolution was not done by the rich people. It was always done by the young journalists who had some fire to do something and who could do it because the system allowed them. This is what is becoming possible now. So hyperlocal journalism, जब मैं I was brought up, I was born in Gwalior, तो जब मैं ग्वालियर, कोरबा, छत्तीसगढ़ में इन सब जगहों पे मैं रहता था, तो there were a lot of places where we will have the local newspapers. There'll be some Agniman, there'll be something. So you know, like a lot of these papers were there. Today they have disappeared. They have not disappeared because you know, like there's no demand for that. People are actually wanting it, but unfortunately, advertising model, which was the primary model for them, that is the reason. And newsprint prices, if you will see, have kept on increasing from last 10-15 years, right? So high production cost, limited scale, and weak monetization killed that. In 1990s, में एक ये Wired के editor थे who came with a theory of 1,000 fans, which he said that if you can just find these 1,000 people in Indian contest, if you have 1,000 people who can pay you 100 rupees a month, you have a 1 lakh rupees, which may not be a bad money for a person living in, say, a small town like a Bilaspur or something to become a feasible journalist, right? Today, that 1 lakh rupees is a, if you go to these places, the journalist salaries are so pathetic that the amount of people who are wanting to pursue this career is falling because there is no economics to it. हम चाहे जितनी भी बातें कर लें देशभक्ति की, इसकी बचाने की ये, but घर पे वो बच्चे को और फैमिली चलाना भी एक जर्नलिस्ट की उतनी ही जिम्मेदारी होती है. That is where we started failing. So basically what has happened is, like, you know, in the earlier scheme, if you see, Google was rewarding the fastest. So there was, you know, there was these entire factories of low-skilled people who were writing story. Sushant Singh mar gaya, so how do I create 200 stories about Sushant Singh even when I have nothing to say, right? But now, why are they changing? They are not changing because they love you. They are changing because they realize that AI can flood them so much that they can become completely useless and people will stop using them. So because their entire entity is in threat with AI today, they are rewarding authority, right? So they want long form, they want expertise, right? And Google ने वो कुछ साल पहले EEAT डाला था, इसमें एक E stands for expertise, right? आप जैसे हिंदू को देखिए तो you know, like what Hindu, they consider Hindu an authority on, say, politics, they consider authority on election, but they don't consider it authority on a Bollywood. They may be treating his authority on Collywood because the Bollywood में शायद वो चोपड़ा जी का जो blog, I'm forgetting the name of that particular website, that might be a much more stronger thing, though it is a small newsroom of 5-7 people, right? So this authority is what, you know, this expertise is what is the biggest news for the journalist. You need to develop your expertise. Though gone are the days, एक बंदा वो जाके पुलिस भी कंप्लेन कर लेता था, वहाँ पे जाके फिर जो है ना वो एक इंटरव्यू भी कर लेता और बिजनेस भी कवर कर लेता. That will not work, right? That kind of a reporter is no longer required. You need to build your expertise. And this is the first time I am seeing such a big alignment where AI is enabling depth because platforms are rewarding depth. Remember that पहले आपको बीच में अगर मैं एक समय में हम टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया में हमने रूल चेंज किया था कि there cannot be any story more than 150 word or something like that, right? Because people were not reading long form, right? If you see the in between, the entire Google was talking about they want short stories, they want lots of stories. Long form was punished, right? Now that has completely changed. So today, first time, all the incentives for the various players are aligned, right? And I think that's an opportunity. आप जैसे इंडिया में एक केस पकड़ते हैं, पंचायत, 2.5 लाख पंचायत हैं, 25 लाख पंच हैं, right? Government of India इनको 46,000 करोड़ हर साल देती है, and that is a small part of their budget, the money which they spend, which runs to about 2.5-3 lakh crores, right, every year, because there are a lot of schemes के पैसे भी इनसे आते हैं. अब इनकी, where is the local scrutiny for them? There is no journalist who can make a viable business out of covering smaller, क्या बोलते हैं आपका पंचायत या फिर blocks या फिर, and that's the reason this is, you know, this is a, so decentralized government and centralized journalism perhaps is what, you know, will build a lot of, can strengthen this democracy of this country, right? So there is a, so this is one use case. I personally see that 5 years down the line, there will be a lot of journalists who will come and start covering it because it will become viable. नाउ जो मैंने इससे पहले 1000 फैन की स्टोरी बात की, हु आर दिस 1000 फैन? आप में से अगर किसी का भी 10 साल का एक्सपीरियंस, आप अपना फोन उठा के देख लीजिए, अगर आप इफ यू हैव लेस देन 2000 3000 कॉन्टैक्ट्स, इट्स इम्पॉसिबल, right? Then you go and look at your social media, the people whom you are connected with on the media, right? Then you look at your email list. मैंने अभी एक्सरसाइज की थी, and I am not at all a journalist, right? I am a pure salesman, तो मेरे सेल्स कॉन्टैक्ट ज़्यादा होते हैं, right? तो 18,000 लोग थे जो मेरे से कनेक्टेड हैं in some way. So in this 18,000, how difficult can be this 1,000 people to be found? It's not easy. But you have to always start with the first friend, family, and the people who will be impacted by your work. Right, and that's where I think will be a good beginning for these 1,000 people. If you are a big reporter like a Shekhar Gupta, you can build an entire, or a Siddharth, you can build a fairly large organizations on your bylines, right? But even if you are not that big, if you start with this 1,000 fan theory, right, 100 rupees, some आप जहाँ पे रह रहे हैं, आपके फैमिली वाले वहाँ पे आपके चाचा मामा शायद उस शहर में रह रहे हैं, इफ़ यू गो टू देम एंड आई एम डूइंग दिस वर्क, द पीपल हु गेट अफेक्टेड बाय योर वर्क, जिस स्कूल को आपने कवर किया, जहाँ का पानी गंदा आ रहा था और उसको आपने कवर किया, दोज आर द पीपल विच विल मेक दिस हाइपर लोकल जर्नलिज्म पॉसिबल. सो आयरनी इज दैट AI क्रिएट्स प्रॉब्लम एंड इट ऑल्सो प्रोवाइड सोल्यूशन, राइट? ये शायद वैसे ही है जैसे शस्त्र होते हैं, राइट? And that's the way it will ultimately figure out that who is using and how they are using it. So non-negotiable as far as journalists are concerned, you have to be original, you have to be verifying, right? You have to be accountable. AI will do these things, smaller things. They have to be lower in the value chain. This presentation, please ask Rishabh to share it with you, whosoever wants a copy, because this is a copy with him. So I think you need to protect the human layer. Relationships, जब आप किसी से मिलते हैं, उसकी बॉडी से बात होती है, उसके आपका जो है ना, there is a, when you are doing a face to face meeting, a person says something but his body says something, right? वो जब झूठ बोलता है तो आपको समझ में आता है, जब वो आंखें चुराता है आपको समझ में आता है. These are the things where the relationships, the moment you get out of those relations, the moment you don't have sources, you are not going to make to the list, right? You need to have your judgment, right? A lot of times that this is the biggest value the humans bring, editorial judgment, right? Your instinct, your courage, that is what makes this profession so unique. And people like salesmen like me want to be in this profession, mainly supporting it because we feel that this does some good work to the world, right? We feel that the journalism is an act of hope. Every time you put up a story, you feel something will change. शायद society थोड़ी अच्छी बनेगी, शायद थोड़ा सा change आएगा, and that hope needs to remain. You have to, so in Hindu, what we are doing is now we are putting our resources to hire more reporters. We don't want to really say that, okay, people we need to cut the newsroom, not at all. We are, if you will see in last 3-4 years, we have only, like we had a small decrease when during the COVID time, we had cut down few people. But if you will start looking at our numbers today, they are growing. Every year we are adding more manpower to our newsrooms because we feel that the only way the journalism, if this organization which has 148 years of history can survive is if it is creates a world-class journalism, right? We feel, and I also tell you that which organization, तो एक दिन मुझे एक बहुत senior journalist ने phone किया, उन्होंने मेरे से बोला कि यार मेरे, I said, see, some big owners spoke to me, so here is my thumb rule for a great successful organization of the future. If in the case of Hindu, we have about 750 journalists, which means that whenever we are pure digital organization any point in time in the history, we should not have more than 1,400 people. 50% of the organization strength has to be journalists. अभी आप देखिए, अगर आप New York Times track कीजिए, they have reached 45%, right? Wherever this number of journalists, अभी हम लोगों के शायद out of we are over 2,400 people, उसमें से हमारे 700 हैं, तो we are not nowhere near the mark, right? So the future, a digital native organization will have about 50% of the entire organization has to be the newsroom. 50% of the people are like me or people, the technology or others whose work is to take that news and take it to the people so that money can be made. Ultimately, entire Hindu group which operates in 1,000 crore kind of a range, every day creates 600 stories and all the money has to be made out of these 600 stories that we generate, and that's the ultimate reality. In the old world, we needed a plant which needed thousands of people. We need a HR to manage those thousands of people. We needed a purchasing team which needed to buy 300 crores of newsprint. All that will not be required whenever the thing whenever this any organization becomes pure digital native kind of an organization. So the thumb rule is, if you do not have 50% of people in your organization, you are sadly placed for the future. Journalists have to keep on moving higher up on the chain. That's the only way we can, we can survive. And finally, machines should not control us, right? We have to control the machines. ये आप लोग सब जानते हैं, मैं इस पे कुछ बोलने से ज़्यादा I don't add any value. So here is again which I am talking. Internet gave a voice. Social media and search gave you the reach, and AI gives you the scale. That's the power of AI. That's it. इसके बाद there are some reference slides, so Rishab, whosoever wants, please circulate it, so that there's a lot of work which has gone into figuring out how you can pick up AI, what are some examples, how the biggest newsrooms like Bloomberg and all that have made tremendous errors by using AI without judgment, right? So whosoever is interested, please ask Rishab for a copy and he'll be able to.
Thank you, Pradeep ji. A detailed presentation, yes. So as we say, we are in a business of news. You're leaving, huh? So by the way, we were supposed to have this tea break. So we won't have it now. We'll have it after the last session. Is that okay? Yeah. So we also wanted to have this Q&A, question answers.
10 minutes.
Yes. So yes, Siddharth is there. If anyone wants to have a question for him to understand more, we'll have this for 10 minutes. Yeah, please. You can, your mic.
Actually, they've covered a lot, really. But maybe I'm repetitive, because I'd like to know what are the solutions. Is the onus also on the readers, or it's entirely on the journalists? And you have given an example right at the end, Siddharth, so that did cover it, that efforts are being made to streamline it. And whatever you've said, that it's, the judgment is there of the journalists. So can you reflect more? Sanket's conclusion also reflected on it briefly. So what can be the solutions? Is it like half and half on the journalists, half on the readers, consumers? And what exactly? Like deep fake is like really scary.
It's the task of a reader has become much more difficult today, because the ability for AI to produce content that mimics news in a way, right? Like 5 years ago, my advice to a lot of people who would see fake content, they would get a WhatsApp forward or whatever. And I would say, look, does this content, this so-called story you're reading, does it mention what is the source of this information? Because invariably, all of the content WhatsApp uncles would forward, it would say, Muslims have done this, etc., etc. There's no source or reference given. And I said, that's your first indication that this is all rubbish. But now you have AI-generated slop that can mimic in a better way the structure, content of news. So it's honestly, it's not easy to be a reader of news. It's not easy to be a journalist either. The number of people I know who have been fooled by deepfake videos, or who see, you see what looks like a screenshot of a New York Times article or an Indian Express article or a Wire piece, and you think, like somebody, for example, fabricated. There is a Dalit scholar in America called Suraj Yengde, and somebody fabricated a screenshot of a Wire article where Suraj Yengde apparently makes the case for pornography. It's a rubbish, completely very offensive, and you could see that the person who created this fake story was also operating in a very casteist mindset, that Dalit guys are after Brahmin women, this very warped casteist kind of mind. So they created this thing, and right-wing handles began to share this fabricated, what looked like a news article from The Wire, and it looked so authentic that I said, hang on a minute, I didn't see the story. And I actually had to, I knew Suraj wouldn't write such a thing. I knew we would never publish such a thing. But I, just by way of abundant caution, because, we've been publishing for 11 years now. So there's a lot of content. So I just went and said, okay, let's look at the back end and see if this exists, and it doesn't. And then, of course, the right wing began to say that, well, the Wire deleted it as soon as it was pointed out. And, so it's kind of, when you have disinformation being done with, these are intelligence operations. Sometimes they involve state actors, sometimes they involve non-state actors. I can deal with AI slop that is generally swirling around us, that is, that's not created with a necessarily malified intent. But what worries me is the use of AI to, with malified intent. So this is it's going to be a continuous challenge.
So you're saying one solution is that the readers kind of monitor, police it, and kind of report it back, like X has that you can on something that's written, you can give your comments.
Yeah, I mean, like platforms like X allows for community notes, and even if community notes were not to exist, because the Modi government is not trying to scrap community notes, but as long as there's a collective discussion, by and large, there is a filter that operates. Wikipedia is a very good example, right? Wikipedia is content that anybody can, it's a platform that anybody can edit. Think about it; it's such a dangerous thing. Like you're giving Amit Shah the keys to edit.
It doesn't allow true content.
No, I'm saying
Wikipedia doesn't allow true content.
No,
I've tried.
No, I'm saying, see, Wikipedia they've developed filters over a period of time.
What?
Wikipedia doesn't allow true content.
No, there's all kinds of content there.
Like my uncle is a famous film producer. He doesn't allow him to be put there.
No, see, it's a question. See, there is because you don't want information overload there, right? So
I think,
but all I'm saying is that the check of having other people access and verify content at that scale works reasonably well. So it's not, do I lose sleep over use of AI? No, I don't. When I see it, you want to deal with it, and it's annoying. But frankly, it's not something that. And I worry about the weaponization of the use of deepfakes, and also the weaponization of public concern over AI. You have to guard about it's like this fake news. They created hysteria over fake news, and then the government said, well, okay, public is concerned about fake news, so we need to have regulations that we are going to control. So you have a fact-checking unit that says, I will decide what is fake, what is not. I mean, that's not acceptable.
I think, Siddharth, if you go back to the question, which is very simple. Now, offering a window to these complexities, what is it that we should do as a solution? Simple. You have the two elements of journalism. One is source gathering, reporting, and the desk, which refines. So desk is what basically is now these lines are blurred. So if you go back to the presentation that was there, the second last slide was there. What is it that we should do? Keep the content original. How do you keep the content original? You allow reporters. You allow more boots on the ground. That is where your content will be original, reporting will be original. That is what Reuters report is also saying. Reporters can't be replaced. They will go, when we go as reporters to the field to speak to people, we don't speak to people only to listen to their voices. We want to feel their voices. We want to have the ambience that machine can't do. There's in communication what we say is that 80% is what you don't say, 20% is what you basically make a sound. So this reporter goes and listens to the people. That is the craft, art a reporter develops over years, decades, and that is where machines can't. This is how you develop original content. And then moderation is where you need in the newsroom. What is the risk? Risk is basically the sovereignty, where editors at the desk would decide what to basically, take. That is the moderation which is required. So editors, owners have to actually be mindful of what they are installing in their CMS, content management systems. So
I just want to add here that, we are not talking about the environment in which, say, the war has taken place, which is kind of shaping the news of tomorrow. although the reporters and press photographers are the anchors to reality. But the truth is that the restrictive environment which is being created by the war is something that might become a norm, because that is the only way that newspapers will choose to function, because they are protecting the national interest, or safeguarding public morality, and that is where the government steps in. So these are fears that have been expressed in many other societies, and they are getting expressed and manifested here every day. Thank you.
I also, from a business perspective, I see a very different perspective as well. See, most of the time brands rise, in this case the brand is a journalist or organization, when there is a too much of something. So if you go to where did the branding start? Few thousand years it started with sheeps. So the sheep used to have a branding on the ear which said that, okay, this guy's sheep is better than the rest, right? So see, for a problem, the society normally solves for a problem when it reaches a certain stage, right? So see, without Rama, Ram also doesn't exist. That's also a reality. So I think a good journalism organization, good bylines, good people will be the one, because once people start realizing there's a lot of fake, and unless they are just interested in a fake news, because one day during this war with Pakistan, one friend called me and said, "Are you saying TV?" I said, "Oh, that's all bullshit." He said, "Yeah, it's entertainment." So he was very, very clear that it is not a news, it is entertainment. So you have to decide what business you want to be. So if you are a respected byline, if your organization, you people will come to you, because they will start realizing that when they want to see entertainment, they should see a TV, and when they want something, perhaps they go to a better source.
Yeah, so we have here with us Nandagopal Rajan, Chief Executive Officer Digital of the Indian Express. So they have AI-enabled newsroom. So, directly listening from the horse's mouth, because he's a journalist, he's a business head, he's running a successful digital platform like Siddharth and others. So we'll have his perspective. So in this session, what is the basically theme is future proofing of AI-enabled newsrooms. We don't obviously restrict to this, but this is so this is what we are going to basically see futuristic, this AI hallucination, how to control, tame it. You want to have a presentation?
Yeah, I have a presentation.
Okay.
So I have one clarification. We don't have an AI-enabled newsroom. We don't have an AI-enabled newsroom.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. So the word future there is very, very important. But there are a lot of tools that you can. So I have a slightly different take from what Pradeep ji was showing. I'll give a little bit of context. So I've been writing on tech for about 20 years now. AI is not a new thing for me. So I've seen, as in AI is not at all a new thing. It's 30 years old. I have been writing on AI for about 10 years, right? So I've seen a little bit of that evolution. Gives me a little bit of context. I think a lot of thinking around AI right now is to solve problems we have, right? I think the ability of AI is to do things we never knew we could do. I think if you think like that, then you can actually do a lot of stuff with AI, right? As Pradeep ji explained, like how could you humanly look at 2 million PDFs, right? Within, or let's say a new bill comes in Parliament, it's 5,000 pages. You can summarize that in 5 minutes, right? And get it right most of the time. So the ability is that. So I'll give a very simple example. How, like this PPT that I've made. Let me just work you through. I was having a chat and said, like, should I make a PPT? He said it'll be good if I make a PPT. Okay, then I didn't have the time. I was driving to office yesterday. I use an app called Gairola. I don't know how many of you know about it. It's a very interesting app. It just makes notes for you. So I was driving. I was alone in the car. I dictated what I wanted to talk. I reached office. Granola had all the notes. I curated the notes. It took me a minute to see, because it's my thing. There is no flaff there. I put it into Anthropic, and the PPT is made in another 2 minutes. Unimaginable maybe a year back, right? And you'll be able to do much more a year later. So that's I think so. A lot of things, like for instance, as a journalist, I've been using a tool called Otter for about 7-8 years now. Started just before COVID. Before that, I used to have some other tool which but transcription used to take 3 to 4 hours of mine on any day I was going out to meet somebody, right? So that's gone. Like, you don't transcribe anymore, right? If you are a journalist who's transcribing, you are wasting your time. There is no other way to put it, right? And I know people who still transcribe. I think of that now, for instance, as more of an excuse. Like, that I will use a istri machine with coal in it. Not, so that's like, okay, you can be, then you are being a very artisanal kind of a product. Yeah. So again, this is also just to give you context. We don't use AI generated content in Express. Okay, absolutely no. I would like to put it as a tag that no, no AI has gone into the generation of this content. So give us a premium. Like so the only exception is that we are using it for some data crunching. We are creating some graphics in places where we have no images possible. We are now experimenting with some AI generated images with full disclosure. So a few things that I think a lot of newsrooms can actually look at is that AI can help you with fixing a lot of slow processes, like this transcription example that I gave. It can create absolutely new editorial capabilities which you never knew you could do. And it can create newsroom concepts that never existed. I think everybody who thought they had a first mover advantage went and made content using AI, right? My take is that most of that came not from the newsroom, but as a business requirement, right? Okay, let's create more content. Our biggest problem is that people are not reading our content. So creating more content is not the answer, right? And we ended up creating a lot of AI generated content. A lot of people who had that first mover advantage are now realizing it was actually a disadvantage. Most of them have been penalized for using AI generated content. There is a very interesting phrase, I don't know how many of you have heard about it. It's called AI slop. Very common now, very commonly used now in the platform space, right? And to the question that was asked earlier, I think AI slop is going to give you the answer. So, as in the platforms itself have already started clearing up the AI slop. It's not helping anybody. So the problem with AI generated content, I'm just reiterating, is that it doesn't have a human quotient, right? As somebody who's edited copies for 25 years, like 2-3 lines into a copy, I can understand it's not humanly written, right? It's too good to be true, or it's too bland. Readers are also starting to detect it, right? Readers, I have had cases, I'm not talking about after this AI spike, even before, like for instance, when we did a regional language, we had people saying, in this part is Google Translate, right? Because if you understand regional languages, translation works very badly till AI came along. The AI is actually very good at it. And so AI also, I think readers can detect it. It's not just because of the M dash. There are a lot of other markers it put in. There is a huge platform risk. Now look at it purely, I heard in my, when I was very actively reporting on platforms from somebody who was very senior in one of the biggest tech companies in the world, saying that, see, look at it, there's always a business reason for whatever a platform will do, right? Now look at it with that lens. They are all moving towards AI, right? AI is trained on high quality content. So they don't want that to be watered down by more AI generated content. Then it'll become a vicious circle, right? So that is why they have started penalizing, they're calling it all sorts of things, but it's penalizing AI generated slop, and there is a lot of it out there, right? The number of websites which generate hundreds of stories without even one journalist. Thankfully, as Pradeep said, that era is over, right? Unless there's something new happens, that is not going to happen. But the platform risk is huge. If you have AI generated content, you are going to be penalized at some stage, right? Now it's a very complex thing. My wife, who's also a journalist, she did an experiment. She put the constitution through an AI detector, and it showed 45% or 50% AI generated. I'm sure Ambedkar will not agree, right? But the problem is the detection is still is flawed, right? But one thing you have to realize is that a lot of the platforms that you use, as in even if it's Gmail, it has some AI in it, right? That leaves some markers in the text, right? So the markers could give a false positive also. So you have to be extra careful in that space. But if you generate content from the ground up using AI, it is going to get caught. There are some exceptions to this, right? There are some places where humans should actually not bother, right? So for instance, baseball scores in the US has been automated for years now, as in, I think almost over a decade now, right? So there are some use cases like that. So you can have stock scripts, for instance, right? Not everybody can understand it if it's just numbers. It can be translated real time into English, as in text, so that people can consume, or weather, just data being converted into, I think is a reasonable use case for AI if you can do it well. So, this is something I think a lot of people are actually not thinking of using AI for, right? It can be a very strict news editor, right? And when we have a lot of, as in newsrooms are, most of the newsrooms are very young. We don't have enough strict news editors working with all the junior people to help them in their career. This is one place where I think AI can work very well, right? Because you are setting the bar and saying that, okay, if you prompt, you're saying, okay, I'm a news editor who's worked with blah blah for at least 30 years. That's the bar, right? You don't have a newsroom like that, right? You have newsroom with people with different skill sets, experience, all of that. Here, your skill set is at the highest. So, what you could do is that you can set an editorial quality. I'm again not saying about writing, okay? It is to say that you can actually optimize for a lot of things from a user perspective, right? It can edit very well, right? Again, it has to go to a human because it will again leave some issues. So editing, as in, let's say somebody is, I don't know, I think some of us must have encountered people who used to be paid per word. They have a very weird way of writing. You cut one sentence, the next sentence doesn't make sense. So very tough to edit because they want to keep the column age as long as possible, right? So those, how do you edit some of those kind of copies, and how do you teach people to edit? I think AI can, with the right prompting, can do a lot of things. So that takes away a lot of the grunt work. AI can also, so for instance, we want people to read more, right? And so we haven't, for instance, done a summary on top of the articles. We have something called Shorts, which is actually 3 years old. But we haven't done summary because we wanted people to read the article. Our biggest challenge is people are not scrolling enough, as in not going into the depth of articles. We also have a lot of long form. And we don't want them to give an easy exit route with a summary on top. So we are like, okay, let them read a little bit more. So we haven't done a summary on top, right? But can you edit to optimize scroll depth? Can you edit in such a way that people keep reading more and more? Like this columnist thing that I was saying, the reporter is writing like that, but can you edit like that? Not everybody can edit like that, right? Like long form editing is a very different type of editing from people who edit 300 word news articles. Can you bring that as a skill using AI? Maybe that's a very good use case of it. Then contextual interlinking, right? So if you work in the digital space, you have a 1,000 word article, you can actually have 10 very good links, which gives a lot of context to the reader. But it's a lot of work when somebody has to publish 10, 20 articles in a day, right? This can actually tell you in this, this anchor text needs to be linked to your article from 2010. Now, for a human to find the 2010 article, even in a place like Express where people have worked for 30 years, is very tough, right, to have that kind of memory. So this kind of institutional memory can be brought in. AI can really help you with that. In fact, very interesting thing, I remember seeing the first version of QuintType, the CMS, many years back, I think 2014, it had this feature, right? So all these kind of things can now be done as a superpower. It's just a simple prompt, and you can add to that. So, also very strict news editor, right? Like a person who is working with you from a brief. So I worked for a couple of years in Business Today with Chaitanya Kalbag. Very tough person to please. Like, I've seen briefs which were longer than the final article because he had to clear the brief, right? You can actually create a news editor who interrogates your brief before you send it to your actual editor, right? And it can be very, very tough because you can set the bar very high there. And again, with a lot of, as Pradeep said, you have single person newsrooms, right? You have a lot of people. So you might not have a news editor. Like if you're a single person newsroom, you create this, it keeps saying, hey, no, this is not good enough. The way I have made it, it even has a slightly news editor kind of language. It calls out BS as BS, right? So it says all of that. It says, hey, there is too much of press note here. Like, work on that. You don't have a balance here. So that interrogation can happen very well at an AI level. Your copy only gets better. So it comes to a point where you think it is now good enough to be submitted to a human editor. I think that is maybe a good workflow for a lot of people to look at. And again, the standard of your organization or masthead can be built into that AI, right? It is not generalized. It's not like, okay, it's always going to be New York Times standard. It can be it'll be your standard. Like, how does Hindu want it? How does Express want it? It again brings in a lot of institutional angle to it. Okay, we don't usually do a certain type of story. You can bring all of that into and it keeps learning the way you prompt it. And ultimately it needs to go to a human editor, right? But it can keep questioning your story. You can do it at a brief stage to say that, okay, these are the elements missing in your article. Once you finally have an article, to say that, okay, these are the problems, this is where you need additional inputs, this is where you need data points, all of that. So it can be a very good news editor, maybe a flow some of the newsrooms could look at. So I often look at AI as a superpower, right? So again, a lot of things which were not humanly possible you can do. Just an example, like, you have 10 years of editorial data. We are now working on a lot of editorial data of just content data, right? Like so we do about 10,000 articles in Indian Express in a month, right? What are the signals that you can capture from that? Like let's say now it's over a 10-year period. It's very difficult to find the kind of patterns that AI can catch out of it, right? So based on that, what is the feedback you can give back to the newsroom? A good part of that, so we use something, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Financial Times Quadrant. Financial Times use an editorial dashboard called the Quadrant, which looks at content into, which puts content into 4 different buckets. We have our own version of it. So the bottom bucket is where there is either no engagement, there isn't engagement, or page views or reach, however you want to put it, which means that you can't even say that it's written for a niche. Even the niche, when they encounter the story, is not reading through the story. That's an engagement metric. So which is the kind of content we want to gradually get rid of. You could start, so the data can start telling you what is the kind of quadrant that is not finding, what are the kind of articles that are usually ending up in this quadrant, or it doesn't have the kind of reader value we think it has, right? So your low ROI content, it can start finding very interesting patterns in it. For instance, just to give you one good example, in one of our cities, it suggested, very clearly, foundation stone laying stories kill. Just simply, and again, like if you are in a very micro, hyper-local kind of environment, you end up doing a lot of those kind of stories, right? The other thing you can do is, okay, when you have data conversations in newsroom, it's usually not a very comfortable conversation, right? We are just not used to seeing data, especially if you have been in print. What is the data we have seen? We have always taken a call, right? The data is, okay, a source called you or a reader called you and said it's great. Yeah, we are happy. It's a great story, right? But nobody's reading it. But data ultimately is your reader, so it's reader behavior. But how do you translate that to something that's very easily consumable in the newsroom for journalists? Like, that is something AI can maybe help you with. For instance, all this data can, I've done some experiments with converting that into a pure checklist. So if you are a technology reporter, based on your own data, we are telling you, don't do this or do this. You are very successful when you do something this way, right? Which is a function of many things, right? When you do a story about this and publish it around this time, it usually works. But when you put something else in your headline and publish it early in the morning, it doesn't work, right? So we have this fascination with early morning, not usually the best time to publish a story, right? It's only because of the muscle memory of print that we think people read in the morning. People actually don't read much in the morning, right? They read through the day depending on when they find time. And you will find that dip in the morning becoming even more severe as time passes. But how do you translate that into something that you will tell the journalist? It's not saying that, okay, increase your page views or increase your time spent. That's not really actionable, but you can actually make it very actionable. When you actually use AI to decipher that data for you. So again, so this is the same thing, but it helps you get into a little, so I've also found that when you do it at a journalist level, it works better. It works slightly, it gets a little bit watered down when you go to a team level or a bureau level. And when you look at the entire data of website, because there are so many signals, it gets a little bit confused. But again, you can create checklists, you can create personal coaching GPTs at a journalist level. Ideally, it should be something you would do yourself instead of somebody telling you this is the best way to do it. And the good thing is it continuously adapts. So for instance, data, right? Like if I told you about 10 years of data, but ideally you should look at data, especially now, maybe for the past 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. Because I think the bigger problem we have with AI as the big elephant in the newsroom is also that user behavior is changing like never before. Pradeep ji said it's a perfect alignment. I think it's a perfect storm. There are many things, but biggest problem is that user behavior. It's not just news avoidance or that people don't have attention spans and all of that. User behavior is also changing because you see, I think 900 million users on ChatGPT, 750 million users on Gemini, right? These two. That pretty much covers your entire active internet space, right? And everybody is literally using some AI on a daily basis. That is also sort of changing your propensity to consume in a way, right? You are not, for instance, we work on UPSC. Hindu also works a lot on UPSC. We got a lot of feedback from the UPSC. We look at, okay, people who are preparing for UPSC as very serious, highly educated. They are all of that, but they are also Gen Z, right? They're saying, hey, we are not used to consuming text in these big chunks. We like the bullet points the way ChatGPT presents it to us. It's a very tough pill for an express to swallow, right? But we have started doing experiments on that, and their reaction is good, right? But user behavior is changing, right? We will have to really think out of the box on some of these things, right? Again, we are not used to, just a thought, for instance, is text the best way to make younger audiences consume opinion? Maybe not, right? Maybe it's audio. Maybe it's a very personal video, right? The impact might be much, much more, right? We have very good opinion writers who have a lot of time spent on their articles. You know why? Because people have to read them twice, thrice to get the idea, right? But it maybe works, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? But with very powerful audio, and if you see New York Times, Economist, all these people have started doing this. I don't know why I listen to Ezra Klein. Right, listen to him every time his podcast drops. It's so powerful, right? So maybe we have to start looking at new ways to help people reach the audience. Also, again, just coming from that, it's formatting at scale, right? You can actually do everything to the power of one if you want. You can do, I think Economic Times does a very interesting newsletter now, which it doesn't ask you which topic you want to read. It asks you, define yourself, right? Who are you? Are you an astronaut or whatever? You say, I'm an astronaut interested in photography, living in the south of India. It will give you a newsletter based on that, right? So again, a lot of what we do is sort of based on how newspapers used to work, right? I always think, why do you have a lifestyle section? I'm sure some newspapers used to have a lifestyle page. What is lifestyle? It doesn't align with the user behavior, right? People like food, people like fashion, people, and they're different components, they're entities in themselves. They can be magazines of their own. What is lifestyle, right? So there isn't, so again, once we start getting out of it, for instance, sports. Who is a sports fan? It's a myth. There is no sports fan. There are cricket fans who are also interested in football and a little bit of tennis, or the other way around. But a person who's interested in all sports, who's that? Like, there isn't a user, but we are sort of fine-tuning for a sports fan, who doesn't exist. So AI gives you little bit more of that ability to do that personalization. Especially with newsletters and all. We have, I think, over 1 million newsletter for subscribers. We could technically deliver a personalized newsletter to each one of them. And it's also how do you change the mode, right? What I said about opinion. Um, the best way for express journalism to be consumed might not always be text. Or if you look at it from the user side, um, I have a 14-year-old at home. He might never read text. He might never read Express. But does that mean he should never experience Express? It could be many things, right? It could be how do you get to all these new users? Could be how open you are to using. So your journalism is protected. Your journalism is very express, but the modes of delivering it might get very different. And AI also opens up the geo barriers for you like never before, right? So you can, for instance, say we want to package yesterday's parliament debate for an 18-year-old girl in Brazil. It can do that with the context of Brazil, which we will never be able to do sitting in Noida, right? So it can do all of that, and it can also open up languages like never before. I don't know how many of you use Gemini language. Have you had a chat with Gemini as a using voice? I'm from Kerala. I'm from Calicut, where people speak in a certain way. I can have a conversation in that dialect. It'll respond to me in that dialect, right? Which is again not possible. We have always thought about broadcast in a very, so like, especially if I give you the example of Malayalam. Malayalam is written in a way it's never spoken in, right? There's a print language in Malayalam, right? But you can actually get into a very localized, like for instance, a conversation we were having, like Santali is one of the languages in India which has the least amount of content available. You can solve that problem overnight. Right? If somebody puts their mind to it, all content we have in the world can be converted into Santali overnight. It's just a project, it will cost money, right? But these kind of new opportunities are also coming up. Yeah, so that's it. Again, a Silicon Valley anecdote. We were having a conversation with somebody very senior in Silicon Valley and asked, "Do you think AI is going to replace developers?" He said no. But if you are a developer who doesn't use AI, you won't have a job. I think the same applies for newsrooms too. Thanks.
Thank you. So Nandagopalji, this presentation is quite exhaustive. So if we can take the question that you raised, what is it that we should do as a solution? Again, in this presentation, I can see that people in the newsroom leaders have to take the informed decision before integrating any sort of AI tool into the news pipeline. For example, moderating pitch, as Nandagopalji was saying, that somebody who is there as a news editor is an AI tool that moderates the pitch, refines them, because it's not a story. The decision that newsrooms, editors, owners have to take is this: what kind of tool has to go into the newsroom, because he comes from sales, Pradeepji, as they use the language that we are in a business of news. That wasn't there earlier. Earlier it was, I'm a journalist, I'm from the editorial, he's a salesman, he's this. All those lines are blurred now. Why? Because one of the very important element in now this revenue is the revenue model for digital is APRU, average revenue per user. So it was a shared experience earlier. You had a newspaper or e-paper in your family, so that was offered, served to everybody. Now you have one story. If you click it, you have to pay this. So there are fragmented experience now. So this fragmented experience is not bad, it's good. So with each story that you are doing, you are serving to your audience, has to be complete, has to have a depth, and as this Reuters report is saying, that the story that can summarize your story in 3 bullet points is not a story. So AI shouldn't replicate your story. How do you do that? Again, your story has to be original. It has to have voices. It has to have ambience. It has to have basically the feelings that you get from the subject, from the field, wherever you go, be it a war zone or a cultural story, environmental story. So we'll go back to this session, which we continue with Sonia, Bhaskar. Yeah. And then we'll have maybe...
Just one thing to add. For the 5 top reasons why people subscribe, 5th reason is because they got a good deal. First 4 reasons are all journalism. And one is the byline in the, they like some journalists. So it's a journalist game now.
Correct. So we have Sonia Bhaskar. She is a public information integrity consultant trainer. She is a strong authority in, how to debunk fake news, how to use those tools to debunk. This credibility is the most important thing. That is why this news evidence can be, fought against. News evidence is there because there's a credibility issue. Credibility issue is there because you don't have a proper system to verify sources, because there's a lot of information. Over to you, Sonia ji.
Thank you, Bilalji. It's very tough to be the last speaker after hearing everyone give all the points, and such senior, seasoned editors and journalists and newsroom experts. Just to take a step back, the topic was about future of newsrooms. So I think the newsroom of the future, and not too, not fast forwarding too much, would be an AI agent scraping all the sources of news, say PTI, ANI, social media handles, etc., making a feed, sending out alert to, say, the desk, and this agent can work 24 hours. Even in the middle of the night, if Trump is saying something crazy and unleashing a nuclear war, it is scraping through all sources, sending out alerts. It can even draft maybe a skeletal copy, and then an editor looking at it, padding it up, and probably putting it out. It is all possible even today. Another AI agent could also be looking at a long form article that you've written and figuring out, okay, here are possible images that can go with it. Here are possible infographics that can be generated out of this copy, and here are the possible short videos that you can generate. All of this is even today possible. Takes a while, takes a lot of tokens. It's not easy, but you can train models. So I think as journalists and newsrooms, we have to get used to the fact that we will have AI agents and colleagues who are AI agents. And it will be for every newsroom to also kind of look at how we train these agents. So it would be like, say, when you used to have interns, you're supervising the intern, you're guiding the intern as to what to do. Agents will be that. So we will have AI colleagues, and we will have to get used to that colleague. And we will also have to see how we train that colleague into our style guide, where we want the intervention, where will the workflow integrate the AI colleague with the human colleague, and where the quality checks will happen. So that future is not far away. That future is already been experimented with, and it is happening across the different chains. Whether it's also if news is, I think the breaking news cycle that we've all gotten into, especially broadcast, I think that can just be automated. You just don't need any human element there. The human element will be in putting context to the news, in analyzing the news, in getting different angles. So we as journalists will have to go back to actually stop doing the lazy thing of just breaking things, getting two people, especially in broadcast, like, get two people, get them to just give the perspective pro, con, and that's my story. No, it's lazy journalism. I think now we have to go back to the drawing board of what are the different angles that I do. Okay, Trump has said this is what's happening, but what are the different angles? What are the different formats I can do it in? What are the different languages that this needs to go out in? What is the context I'm going to set? Does this need an FAQ? Does this need a timeline? Does this need an AI agent to go through and scrape my archives to see how I can put this into a visualization form of a timeline of sorts? And all this is happening. Even a small newsroom in India like Scroll has actually done this. They are actually deploying AI to scrape through their archives, to actually put context to it, to create videos, to figure out what if there can be timeline features. And the whole concept of this AI thing is being spoken about now because we have had a ChatGPT experience. But the fact is, even 6 or 7 years ago, 2019 actually, when I was doing my Shielding Fellowship and my research essay was on automation in newsrooms, I spent considerable amount of time with BBC and their news labs head. they were doing all of this. They had archived the entire BBC archives, right from radio, television, was into an automated system which anyone in any bureau globally could access. They could take snippets out. They could take, put context to their stories. You could do a lot of automation in terms of translations. BBC had 40 languages. I create a video in English, it could easily do the sub, and it was an in-house developed AI tool. That time there was no chat GPT. So this process had already started 6-7 years ago. What we are just seeing now is the democratization of it and a simplification of it, where I just put a prompt and I can do XYZ things. And that too also, we are taking a very simplistic argument of just generating content. There's a lot more that AI needs to do in the newsroom, in the workflow, and that is something we need to invest in. I have seen, I mean, when I'm, as my last position with NDTV, which I held for about 10 years, which was TV Web Synergy, when I started in 2013, the biggest challenge was that to get television journalists to understand that, okay, if you're writing a script, how will you give it for digital, which is different, and digital will then also have to kind of disseminate it into different formats for Facebook, for Twitter, for YouTube. It was always, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources. Those excuses is what AI is going to wipe out completely. Like the kind of headache and the kind of heartache one used to go through as a synergy person, trying to synchronize departments into making sure there's every format is catered to, every kind of platform is catered to. Those, all that production headache is now getting completely taken over by AI. So the journalist now has a challenge. How am I telling my story differently? If a Wires journalist is covering the same story and Hindu journalist is covering the same story, what will the angle be? Because as readers, that is what we have to offer to the readers. You asked a question. What has happened right now from the reader's perspective is, because there are so many content creators, now news is being done by influencers as well. The information glut is too much. Journalists have to now actually have a distinctive voice. And yes, a lot of the legacy publications do it. But to cut the clutter and to get out of this whole thing of AI avatars, there are influencers creating the AI slops, as we are talking about, the volume, the quality of the product has to stand out, and we will have to create distinct voices. That's what the newsroom has to do. And the newsroom has to be open to the idea of deploying AI to actually simplify the workflows and get out of this mindset of we don't have resources. You will have to figure out how technology can facilitate. And as editors, as journalists, as desk people, we all have to be attuned to technology. I saw huge amount of resistance as a synergy person to digital platforms. I saw huge amount of resistance when we would go to, I mean, Sanket is gone, but I know the newsrooms would be, anchors would be like, we can't do this for, the shorter version for YouTube. And when we were taking off for these different platforms, we were also chasing the algorithms of these platforms. Sometimes they would want longer formats, sometimes they would want shorter formats, sometimes they would want reels, sometimes they would want carousels. Imagine it's the same content is getting versioned. The same content needs resources to version it. So the future of newsroom will be a far more leaner, meaner sort of workflow, but with storytelling and journalism as the distinctive product, as the distinct, and how we'll draw the distinction is where it is going to be. I think Nandu spoke about the fact that multi-language. I mean, there are underserved communities who are, there's information glut on one side, but there are stories that are not being told, or people who feel that their stories are not being told. You mentioned Santali. There's also IIT Delhi working on Adivani project with almost 15 tribal languages because they will become extinct and there's no documentation of those languages. Now, as journalists, if I'm doing good journalistic piece, imagine if I can do it in a language where the people don't get to consume that kind of content. And and that is going to be widening my reach, widening my audiences, taking my story. If I'm writing a story in English and nobody's, and it's something that's relevant for the tribal community that is protesting, Vedanta mining project, it is important because they don't see the headlines that when they kind of see their stories not there, they kind of back off. They kind of go off the news radar. That's where the deficit of trust is also happening. And that's where they try to do their own mobile version of journalism that, look, this is what we are doing. Nobody's talking about our story. So I think we need to, journalism will be the central piece that will kind of create the sanity. And AI will be the piece, or the technology, I mean, just not AI, but technology will be the piece that facilitates journalism to survive in a more efficient fashion. And for that, yes, there needs to be stringent guardrails in terms of AI policies, constantly evolving AI policies as well, because AI will change. I think we need to get out of the dependence on what the big tech will constantly keep tweaking and changing. We should also be looking, there's also a thought process that's evolving, that large language models, like you said, hallucinate, etc. There are smaller AI models that are far more efficient, and they are far more controllable, which work with your database, with your thing, so they don't hallucinate. So you can control it and train it better to just work with your style guides and work with your guidelines. The moment you talk about ChatGPT, yes, it goes out of control. But even, I don't know how many of you have used Notebook LM, which is a Google product, but that will not hallucinate. It can, a free version of Notebook LM, you can upload up to 50 sources of content, PDFs, YouTube links, websites, and it can help you research. So if I'm, say, researching on women's reservation bill, and there are, or delimitation, I can upload up to 50 sources of content to research. So imagine research reports or bills, acts, different versions of certain bills. It can summarize for you. It will not hallucinate. Also, it will give you, from, if it's picking up certain paras, it will also give you a link for you to go back and click and see from where it has procured it. So you can also verify it. And the sources I will provide, like if I, just as we do Google search, but I can provide the sources that here are the PDFs, please tell me what is there in these PDFs. So the tools will come, go. It is important that we first identify the problem. If hallucination is the problem, then we figure out tech solutions to them, or tools that are working around this problem. As journalists, we need to get out of the mindset that I'm not a techie, I don't understand tech. We all have to understand the pros and cons of technology. We all have to understand tools. Just as we have understood how mobile works, Facebook works, we need to be open, constantly learning, upgrading, upskilling ourselves. And that's something that a future newsroom will need. Hackathons are things that apparently techies do, but I know that we have done hackathons with newsroom guys who will which will have a combination of teams. You will have desk people, you have writers, you may have tech guys, you may have design guys, and they solve a problem that, okay, I wanted to do this with, there was so much of documentation, I couldn't solve that. So how do we do this? So they provide an entire workflow of where the AI can help, where a journalist can help. So if I have documentation of PDFs, summarizing that, how to visualize it. Mint, I think recently through a Google News Initiative sort of training program for the budget, like I know when we used to do tax calculators, just to get a tax calculator going in terms of coding, in terms of designing, in terms of the math behind it, would take us a lot of time. It was a production. They just used vibe coding through AI Studio, Google AI Studio, and it was done. It was done in less than whatever, in an hour, and it was out. They had embedded it into their in their budget story. It was out there. Something that would take us weeks to do was done through vibe coding without any knowledge of code. You don't need to write the code. You just have to write the prompt and it will feed the data and it will do it for you. So as a result, the important part is preparedness. It is important to constantly upskill yourself, identify the problems, be aware of the problems, but all these problems also have a tech solution also available. So it's important to kind of engage in those conversations and engage with the teams and interdisciplinary, cross-functional teams to be able to find solutions for the newsrooms. Like I said, I think the focus will go back to how distinct and different your storytelling can be. A lot has been also spoken about deepfakes, misinformation, disinformation, something I've been spending a lot of time in the last few years. Um, since 2018. I remember when we were the first batch of Google News Initiative trainers to train journalists and journalistic and newsrooms. I have met editors who would tell me, we don't need fact check, we don't need to fact check this thing because our readers are very evolved. Our publication is read by educated people. They will never fall for something like this. The point is, that was not the reality. Soon it became, people couldn't distinguish between what is a Kerala flood, what is an Assam flood. Soon it became far more evolved and difficult to kind of distinguish between political narratives and all of that. So you had publications set up fact check units within their organizations as the problem became bigger. So I think as journalists, we also need to kind of preempt the problem. We also need to understand where the trends are going so that we are prepared as a newsroom to tackle it. I don't think we were very equipped or trained, and we saw the problem of misinformation and the scale it would attain back in 2018 or 2019 also, because that was the time when we had started working. Even in terms of deepfakes, a lot is spoken about the warfare, the politics. Last year, I worked on a research report on how online misinformation was leading, the biggest kind of scams and financial misinformation, and how people, ordinary people, we were looking at it from the user perspective. They would encounter a Facebook post or an Instagram reel, and how then they would be taken into a Telegram and a WhatsApp group, which is a closed, encrypted platform, which is very difficult for you to track, and how those were leading to financial scams. So as a result, deep fakes or misinformation, disinformation, there'll never be a tool for it. It will always be about critical thinking. And I think as journalistic organizations, I've also started now seeing a lot of the Western publications do this, where they're explaining and breaking down how they have done the story, from where they have sourced, how they do a journalistic piece. I think it's also important that we as journalists explain to people why our piece is more credible and takes a lot of time and hard work. So media literacy that we talk about, our AI literacy, should be factored into our journalistic pieces as well, for people to appreciate the work journalists do. Happy to take questions, but please don't be enamored by tools. Please don't be enamored by the technology. Constantly be part of conversations, understanding what the what are the discourse is, and how you can utilize it to benefit your storytelling and your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. So it's all about convergent journalism. So empower yourself to understand every element of journalism, whether it is floating image, floating video, floating text, which AI can do, and give you the real-time heat map where you see New York Times, Al Jazeera showing every day, those number of casualties. So these are the things that will actually give breather to your users. So we'll conclude today's session. I will have last remarks in 1 minute from Mr. Sanjay Kapoor, editor, Hardnews, and President, Editors Guild of India. Sanjay ji.
Plenty of food for thought from all the speakers. And as this hall is only for 1 more minute before they start shutting the light, we have no other option but to go away and have something to eat in the other room. So thanks everybody. Thank you, Siddharth, Pradeep, Nandagopal ji, Sonia, Bhaskar, and also my good friend Bilal. Thank you everybody, all the audience. So this is the time to step out. Thank you very much. We would have loved to do more, but I think this is all we can do today. Thank you.